Good afternoon, everyone. We are here today to honor the memory of Ashok C. Sani. Mr. Sani was a distinguished graduate of NYU and a successful entrepreneur and a loyal supporter of our school and community, and he was a founding member of the NYU Stern Alumni Council. And alas, he left this world far too soon. The Ashok C. Sani Lecture exists to put before our community Mr. Sani's interests and values in ethics, in truth, in peace, and in moral and social responsibility. And it would be difficult to find an academic who in his work and in his writings and in his person better represents Mr. Sani's ideals than today's speaker, Robert Frank. Robert Frank was trained as a mathematician and then as an economist, and then pursued an academic career at Cornell, where he prospered to the point of getting tenure. And then after he was awarded tenure, something really strange happened. He started thinking creatively. And I can tell you from experience that this creative thinking often stops after tenure for many academics. With Bob, it kind of started. There was a sort of midlife flowering, if you will. He is not your usual academic. And from this came a torrent of books and writings that together, I believe, and I'm not exaggerating, have opened the field of economics to nothing less than humanity itself. By throwing off the tyranny of the omnipresent rational actor model, thereby opening the gates to new fields of inquiry, one of which we now call behavioral economics. So let me support this bold assertion with a few examples of his work. Choosing the Right Pond was published 30 years ago and suggests that relative success and status count as much or more than absolute success or status. Now, this is an idea that novelists and poets have known for a long time. H.L. Mencken once said that true wealth in America is making $100 a year more than your wife's sister's husband, which kind of gets at the same point, but with less rigor. But Bob wrote the book. When he wrote the book, this was economic heresy. It's now common knowledge. Passion Within Reason, written a few years later, described how our emotions strategically influence our perceptions and behavior in ways we hardly realize, often to good effect, but sometimes catastrophically. Again, these ideas were economic anathema. The rational actor has no feelings. But these writings have spurred the creation of an entire field of study in academia around emotion and economics. Given that everyone today is waking up to issues of income and wealth distribution and inequality, and that an entire presidential campaign is built upon the idea, it's uncanny to realize that Bob co-authored the great book, Winner Take All Society, 20 years ago. If Bob has an academic fault at all, it's that he's too far ahead of the rest of the pack to get full credit for his work. Many others have jumped into these ideas and gone to great glory on them. Bob's the one who wrote them down. Among academics, we talk about his books. I can't really give you the analogy, and this I'm going to date myself, is like Beatles albums. It's like, where were you when you first heard Revolver? Where were you when you first read, Passions Within Reason? That's how academics see these things. These books were liberating for us. And whether these books or in What Price the Moral High Ground, or in his latest, Success and Luck, what we see in Bob's work, I believe, in addition to an awesome imagination and economic insight, is a project to put economics on a more humane basis, where it indeed incorporates our own concerns with status and with dignity and with equity and with getting things right. In short, with the ideals by which Ashok Sani lived his own very productive life. I must also add that those of us who know Bob personally know that he embodies these same noble ideas in his behavior and his being. He's been associated with our program one way or the other for a number of years. It's been a great honor and privilege. And so please join me in welcoming today's Ashok Sani lecturer, Bob Frank.
One of the reasons I was so excited to accept Bruce's invitation to give this lecture was that I knew I would get to hear him introduce me. He has introduced me to a couple of other events, and I think there's a concept in economics called the winner's curse. The the person who has the most wildly optimistic estimate of the thing ends up winning the auction and overpays for it. So I'm glad you didn't have to put any money down on me over the years. But I very much appreciate the kind sentiments. It's a great honor to be the Ashok Sani lecturer this year. I've learned a lot about your late uncle in one case. I'm not sure how you're all related to him, but he was, by all accounts, an extraordinary person, and it's for me a great honor to be able to speak in honor of his memory. I've written a book about luck, primarily because luck has had such an outsized influence on my own life. I wasn't interested, a lot of people ask, what's an economist doing writing about luck? And I hadn't long had an interest in the subject, but there, as I'll report to you, I've had a couple of dramatic examples of luck in my own life that forced me to think about the role of chance events. And it's been an enormously interesting subject to investigate. I've learned lots of interesting things in the process, some of which I'll have time to report to you today. But let me just, as a preface, describe to you maybe the luckiest thing that ever happened to me. I'm going to say this is a big room full of people. Even in a room full of people this big, I'm almost certainly the luckiest person in the room. It's never certain. There could be someone who's even more fortunate than I've been, but I think it takes a much bigger arena to have the likelihood of that be more than 50%. But you tell me afterwards, come around, and if you think you're lucky, you won't really know how lucky I've been. I'll just tell you a couple of things. This is my longtime friend, collaborator, tennis partner, Tom Gilovich, the psychologist at Cornell. He and I were playing tennis one cold morning in November of 2007. He later told me that early in the second set, as we sat during a changeover, I complained to him of feeling nauseated. And he said the next thing he knew, I tumbled off the bench where we were sitting and was lying motionless on the side of the tennis court. He knelt to investigate. I wasn't breathing. I had no pulse. He yelled out for someone to call 911, and then, thankfully, he flipped me over onto my back and started pounding on my chest. Something we've all seen done in movies, but I've never been trained to do. He hadn't been either. He acted quickly. He said that it took forever, but finally he got a cough out of me. But then, as quickly as that happened, I was gone again. No breath, no pulse. And he was about to give up hope when he said the doors to the facility burst open and in rushed an emergency medical team. They cut my shirt off me. They put the paddles on my chest. They shocked me back into existence, put me in the ambulance, took me to the local hospital, where they flew me to a larger hospital in Pennsylvania. There they put me on ice overnight. And 3 days later, I began to have some idea of what was happening. Doctors told me that I had suffered an episode of sudden cardiac death. Some people call it sudden cardiac arrest. I like to wring a little more drama out of it by calling it sudden cardiac death, because really you are dead. The question is, are you going to stay dead? And 98% of the people, my doctor told me, do stay dead when this happens. If you get immediate attention, then they can revive you, but typically you don't get immediate attention. In New York, the average time for an ambulance to get there is 12 minutes, and that's not time enough. Almost everybody dies in that case. If you survive, if you're among the 2%, he told me, you don't want to meet these people. These people are all kinds of damaged. You're without oxygen for a long time. Things happen. And so my family tells me later that for 3 days after they'd gotten me stabilized, I was talking nonstop nonsense from my hospital bed. I couldn't remember what had just been said. I was spouting gibberish. Then on day 4, I awoke with a clear head. Somehow my brain rebooted on day 4. I was discharged. I was scheduled to take a stress test. I passed it. And a day or two later, Tom and I were back on the tennis court playing again. The reason I'm here, the reason I'm the Ashok Sani lecturer, is not just that Tom acted with dispatch, I'm grateful for that, but the ambulance got to me in time to make a difference. How did that happen? The tennis center's 6 miles out of town. Ambulances are dispatched from the other side of town. It would normally take 25 or 30 minutes for an ambulance to get there. How did this one get there so quickly? And here's the luck part of the story. There were 2 auto accidents that had occurred just near the tennis center moments before I collapsed. Ambulances had, minutes before I collapsed, not moments. Ambulances, 2 of them, had been sent to the scene of these accidents. The call came in that they had somebody who was in real trouble, and since there weren't serious injuries at one of the accidents, the attendants had been able to peel off and travel the 200 yards to get to me. And except for that odd quirk of fate, it could be karma. That's not how I think of it. My mother would have thought of it as divine intervention. Fine if you think of events like that in that way. I think it was just a remarkable stroke of good fortune that happened. And so for me, that's the luckiest thing, but there have been many others. I started taking interest in the subject of luck, and I wrote a column about it. I write a regular, did for more than 10 years, write a regular column for the New York Times Sunday business section, and talked about the link between chance events and successful outcomes in the marketplace. I got a call from Fox Business News a day or 2 after the column appeared. Would I come on and discuss my column with Stuart Varney, one of their hosts, a man who was deeply unsympathetic to the idea that luck might be important in life. I went onto their website and found a recording of the segment. It lasted 6 minutes. I'll just play you a little snippet of it.
Success to economic success. Hard work, talent, determination? No, not so, says Cornell University professor Robert Frank. He's actually smiling. He's sitting next to me. Here's what he says. Contrary to what many parents tell their children, talent and hard work are neither necessary nor sufficient for economic success. He says success has a lot to do with luck. And he's joining us right now in the studio. Professor, wait a minute. Do you know how insulting that was? When I read that, I came to America with nothing 35 years ago. I've made something of myself, I think, through hard work, talent, and risk-taking. And you're going to write in the New York Times that this is luck.
No, I didn't say that in the New York Times. What I said, actually, is that if you have lots of talent and you work very hard, you're still probably not going to be a big success. There's also a big element of luck.
But I'm taking the other side of the coin, which is you said that you need luck, and luck is part of being wealthy and successful. You are downturning, downplaying hard work, talent, brains, drive, and ability. You are, in fact, taking on the American dream. You're saying that the American dream is not really the American dream. It's not really there.
No, I don't believe I'm saying that, Stuart. No, I reviewed some footage before coming down. I would say, respectfully, consider the possibility that you're very lucky. You do a lot of hard work, I'm sure. You started with not much, but you're very lucky to have ended up successful. There are a lot of people who work hard and are just as talented
wait a minute,
haven't been successful.
Am I lucky or not?
Yes.
Who I am and where I am. I'm
yes,
lucky.
You are.
Lucky, okay.
And so am I.
That's outrageous. That is outrageous. What about the risk I took? Do you know what risk is involved in coming to America with absolutely nothing? Do you know what risk is involved in trying to work for a major American network with a British accent, a total foreigner? Do you know what risk is implied for this level of success?
I do.
Is it luck that you hold a tenured position?
Yes.
That's nonsense.
It wasn't just luck. I got the 7th job at Cornell the year I was hired. They've never hired 7 people before.
So there's no point.
The only other option. No,
What's the point?
If you try hard and you have a lot of talent, you have a much better chance to succeed than if you don't try hard and you don't have talent.
So the point of
But
luck,
it also helps to be lucky.
So because we are lucky, anybody who's made it has a degree of luck. We shouldn't mind paying confiscatory tax rates.
you should be prepared to pay taxes in support of the public services we all enjoy. There's nobody talking
what do you
about
think
sophisticated.
If you make $1 million a year, what do you think is a fair tax rate? Should the government take half?
The president has proposed to let the top tax rate on income go back to 39.5%, which is where it was.
$395,000 out of every million.
No, that's the marginal tax
Where
rate.
do you think it should be?
I think it should be higher than that.
Really?
Because at 39.5%, we have still big deficits going forward.
Wait. You think it should be fair? If it's not 39.5%, you think it should be higher. What do you think is fair?
I think we should scrap the income tax altogether.
Oh, come on.
And
What's
in its place, put a much more steeply progressive tax on consumption.
Right. Okay, so 50%. Take it
on
off.
consumption?
No, 50% income tax.
Oh, there
Get
are
real.
many,
We've got a
there are many
system.
countries with marginal tax rates on income of 50%.
Yeah, and I choose not to live in them. I choose to live
well.
here. Why do you want to put it to 50% or high? What do you want? 50, 60, 75%? What do you want to take off me?
I want the tax rate on myself to be higher because right now the government has cut back the Energy Department's program to lock down loose
You're an
in the
academic.
former Soviet
You're tenured.
Union.
You can leave here, go back to your socialist newsroom at the New York Times, your socialist environment at Cornell. You're not going to lose your job. You can say whatever you like. You take no risk whatever.
Sir, you're proving my point that luck's necessary to succeed.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I am absolutely not. I am insulted by what you said.
Well,
you are going against the American dream.
I'm not.
Look, if you come to America with nothing and you play by the rules, you work hard, you get disciplined inside yourself,
right.
You marry and have children in that order, okay? You do all of those things. You play by the rules. You will make it in America, and luck has nothing to do with it.
That's not true, sir.
Where does the luck come in?
Oh,
why am I lucky?
I don't know about your case. I'm lucky because I got a good job to start, but I got it by the skin of my teeth. If I hadn't gotten it, I wouldn't have had the career that I've had. No, it's not all luck. I worked hard, too.
Aren't you intelligent? More intelligent than the other guy who wanted the job?
I'm intelligent. I'm hardworking. I'm disciplined.
Are you about to tell me that you're lucky because you were born a white male? Is that it?
I think there's some luck in who you're born, absolutely.
Okay, and where you're born?
And the fact that you work hard, why do you work hard? I mean, you were raised
because
well,
I want to make the money. I'm motivated by I'm an American.
With a constitution that predisposed you to work hard, you were lucky.
Why don't you go and live in that socialist paradise of Britain or France or Italy? Very high marginal tax rates. They just put it up to 50%.
Why can't I stay in my own country? I'm contributing.
Why do you want to make America more like Europe, with a very low growth rate, high unemployment, very high taxes, very high prices, and a declining population, and a high suicide rate? Why do you want to make us like them? Why?
I want us to eliminate our deficits. I don't want my kids to...
You don't eliminate deficits by high taxes. You eliminate deficits by growth.
You eliminate deficits with a combination of prudent spending, high savings, and higher taxes on the people who can afford it.
Do you teach economics?
I do.
At Cornell?
At Cornell.
And they pay, what, $40,000-$50,000 a year for this?
Actually, they pay more than that.
So the rich parents...
I said I'm lucky.
The rich parent, the lucky rich, who send their children to this egalitarian classroom to be taught socialism, they are lucky to have the money to be able to afford this education. Is that it?
If you can afford an education at those prices, I'd say
lucky.
You are lucky. Yeah.
Extraordinary
Yes,
stuff.
sir.
But, Professor, it was fun.
It was.
We thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
It went on for another 4 or 5 excruciating minutes. It was painful to sit through. I got in my cab leaving the studio, and of course, only then did I think about all the fat pitches he had thrown my way that I'd completely failed even to swing at, much less connect with. He said he'd come to the USA with nothing. He was an LSE graduate. He had a degree from the London School of Economics. That's coming to the U.S. with nothing. He wanted me to know that he had somehow overcome the handicap of working in America with a British accent. The man pictured here is Frank H.T. Rhodes. He was the president of Cornell for 17 years, most of them early when I was in my post there. And he was educated at Oxford. He had a very crisp, refined Oxbridge accent. I once spoke to one of his colleagues from the University of Michigan, where he had landed at first in the US, and he said to me that Rhodes's Oxbridge accent was much fainter when he first came to America than it is today. Well, no wonder. Americans love British accents. You hear him in front of the alumni group, they're reaching for their checkbooks. They're so charmed by this erudite man telling them what their money will help do for Cornell. But I didn't think to make any mention of that until it was too late. He said he took risks. This was the one I still have deep regrets about missing on. He took risks. Well, what's a risk? I looked it up. Merriam-Webster, risk is the possibility that something bad or unpleasant, such as an injury or loss, will happen. He took risks and he succeeded. Well, that means by definition that he was lucky. Full stop. You know, he just shot himself in the foot, but I didn't have the wit to point that out. Several of my friends castigated me in email messages that day. Why didn't you say blah, blah? Yeah, why didn't I? So, yeah, it would be great to be able to think quickly on your feet in high-pressure situations like that, but not everyone has that ability. Occasionally, I manage to get off a good answer to a question like that, but often I miss. Mostly, the consequence is just some embarrassment. All right, so I didn't do as well as I feel I ought to have in that interview with him. But once my failure to think clearly in a tight situation nearly cost me my life. I'll describe that to you. That's I've cut out all the other personal luck stories except this one. I was windsurfing on Cayuga Lake. That's the lake that abuts Ithaca. It was an interesting day. The winds were very fluky, anywhere from dead calm at one moment to 40-mile-an-hour gusts the next. So it's challenging to windsurf in conditions like that. Windsurfers in heavy air will use a device that you see in the photo here. It's called a harness. It's basically a life jacket with a hook in the front. The hook hooks through a rope that's attached to the boom of the windsurfer, and that helps you keep the boom, the sail and mast upright against all the pressure you would otherwise have to apply exclusively with your hands and arms, so you don't get tired as quickly. It's a good device. Well, along came, after a lull of the heaviest gust of the afternoon, it blew me over the boom and mast. I did 2 twists in the air before hitting the water. I hit the water very hard. I was stunned. I was not unconscious, but as my head cleared, I realized, well, I'm under the sail. And there's no air between me and the sail and the lake's surface touching the sail. I got to get out of here. So I tried to pull the hook free from the rope. But because of the twists I had done, the rope was wrapped too tightly around the hook. The hook on my vest had a little nipple on the end, so you couldn't just slide it off. So after struggling to get the rope free and without success, I started to push up on the sail, hoping to get some air to come up underneath it. That did nothing too. So I was starting to get scared. I had 2 plans of attack. Neither one worked. I went back to the rope. And I worked hard on the rope, nothing. I tried one more time on the sail, nothing again. I'm really getting panicky now. I tried the rope one more time, and then in desperation, very little time left, I pushed up on the sail, and I heard a glorious sucking sound. Air rushing up underneath the sail. I kicked up to the surface of the lake. I breathed heavily. I calmed down. And then I realized what I should have realized instantly when I was first in that situation, which was that I didn't have to get the rope free from the hook. I could just unzip my life vest and take it off and swim out from under the sail. That's what I did, but I didn't think of that in the pressure of the moment. So I've been lucky. I came close to dying that time. I did die one other time. There are other stories I can tell you, but I won't in the interest of time. So when you experience events like that, you don't easily overlook the fact that you were luck's beneficiary or the beneficiary of whatever else you feel comfortable calling that. And it's not always good luck. Here is a photo of the scene on a rural English highway. The man in the bow tie is Mike Edwards. He was the cellist in the group that became the Electric Light Orchestra. Some people in the room are old enough to know who they are. He was driving along a rural highway in England, minding his own business, hadn't harmed anyone. He was well-liked, a decent, peaceful man. He was described in his obituary. A bale of hay, 1,000 feet up the hillside, somehow came loose from its moorings, rolled down the steep hillside, hit a berm, catapulted over the high fence that was between the field and the roadway, and landed on top of his van, crushed him to death instantly. Bad luck. So we notice those things. Somebody wins the lottery. Good luck. We notice that. We don't need tutoring and luck to notice those things. But most of the time, luck doesn't play out in such vivid ways. And when it doesn't, we're incredibly inept at noticing it. There is a phenomenon in the social sciences called hindsight bias. Paul Lazarsfeld, the sociologist, was one of the early advocates of this point of view. It's that when you see an outcome, it's almost always easy to invent a narrative that makes the outcome seem to have been inevitable. And that's particularly true, he argued, in the case of success outcomes. He demonstrated the phenomenon with a simple survey experiment. He asked people were told that a survey had been done in which people were asked who's better able to withstand the rigors of military life, urban recruits or recruits from rural areas. And the finding of the study, subjects were told, was that people from rural areas adjusted much more effectively. And the reaction of subjects was, well, yeah, okay, but why does anybody need to do an expensive study to find that out? And the twist is that there was a study done, but the findings of the study were precisely the opposite. It was the urban recruits who adjusted much more readily to the rigors of military life. And we can invent a narrative for that too, but you think you understand what happened just because you can invent a plausible story that accounts for it. So you see a successful outcome, oh, that had to have happened because he was so talented or so hardworking, blah, blah, blah. Every life course, every career trajectory is the sum of thousands of little steps. Each step depends on all the steps that took place before it. Some of those steps are pure chance events. I don't know which ones they are without more information, but there's no career path that doesn't include at least some random steps in it. And when one of those random steps would be different, that changes the direction of the path, and the path may veer substantially by the time it reaches its conclusion. Maybe what would have been a success had that event not been different will be an abject failure. Maybe it will be an even bigger success. We don't know, but it'll be different. So the outcome that did happen could have been very different in most cases had any of those little steps been different. Here's a nice example. I think this example calms some of the concerns about this line of thinking about success. You'll recognize, those of you who are fans of TV dramas, the lead characters from Vince Gilligan's award-winning series Breaking Bad. Bryan Cranston was not somebody I had ever heard of before I saw Breaking Bad. People tell me, oh, he was the dad in Malcolm in the Middle. I never saw Malcolm in the Middle. I don't care about Malcolm in the Middle. What is it even? He was in his 50s. He never had a leading dramatic role. Vince Gilligan, the producer, wanted to cast him in the Walter White role. That's by far the central role in the series, the ailing chemistry teacher, high school chemistry teacher, who, to leave a financial legacy for his family, wants to amass some cash and decides that the easiest way to do it is by producing and selling methamphetamines, which he can do to a high standard. An incredibly engrossing series, but Cranston was offered the role only after studio bosses said, never in a million years would we hire him. They offered the role first to John Cusack, then to Matthew Broderick. Both of them turned it down. Gilligan again pressed his case. He showed them some footage from an X-Files episode 20 years back, said, no, this is the guy we want, and they reluctantly agreed to do it, and the rest is history. I wrestled with my editor. I called it the most successful dramatic series of all time in television. He made me say perhaps the most successful dramatic series. It was anyway a really good dramatic series, and now Cranston is very much in demand. But if he hadn't had a break, if those two had either one of them accepted the role, he would still be laboring in the trenches, and I still wouldn't have heard of it, and most of you wouldn't have either. And he's got the wit to recognize that. He acknowledges he was incredibly lucky. Here are two people you'll recognize. Well, one of them anyway. The woman in the upper left is maybe the most famous female face in the world. She is, of course, the Mona Lisa. Who's the one in the lower right? Many people recognize her, but not everyone. There's maybe less reason to recognize her. What did she ever do, you could say? She's Kim Kardashian. Kim Kardashian, it has been claimed, is famous for being famous. People resist when you say the Mona Lisa is famous for being famous, but there's a case. Duncan Watts, one of my intellectual heroes, was at the Louvre. He saw the throngs that always surround the Mona Lisa. You have to fight your way to get anywhere close to the painting. My reaction was, what's the big deal, when I saw it for the first time? Duncan had that same reaction, and then he noted that in the gallery adjacent to the one where the Mona Lisa hangs, there are two other Leonardos from the same period using the same new style of brushstroke that he was using in the Mona Lisa. Nobody cared a bit about those paintings. They weren't interested in seeing them. Nobody was crowded around at all. What's going on? He did a little digging. Turned out one of my colleagues, James Cutting, had done some of the pioneering work on this. The Mona Lisa had been a completely obscure painting. I maybe shouldn't say completely because it was a Leonardo and he was such a visible figure in the art historian's world. But nobody thought it was a particularly significant painting. Then in 1911, it was stolen from the Louvre. Vincenzo Peruggia tucked it under his cloak one night, a custodian, and walked out with it. And the theft was a huge news event. For the first time ever in world history, images of a painting were splashed across the front pages of newspapers all around the world. It stayed unresolved. Nobody could figure out what had happened for 2 years. Then Peruggia tried to repatriate the painting to the Uffizi Gallery in Florence. He thought it belonged in Italy. And so the director of the Uffizi, of course, had to turn him in. Then another explosion of publicity, photos splashed across newspaper pages. And ever since then, the painting has been a symbol of Western culture. But consider the possibility that it's not a particularly good painting. It's just a painting that is famous because it got stolen in 1911 and it was the first painting ever to become a worldwide cause célèbre. Duncan Watts has done lots of interesting things. I think in the interest of time, I'll skip over his really provocative experiment where he showed that when people are listening to music they've never heard before, they might go on to rate it as terrific. They might give it thumbs down in a large proportion. It all depends on how the first people react to it. If the first people happen to like it and we can see that others have liked it, then it has a good trajectory. If the first people happen not to like it, then it goes skidding off into the gutter. Talk about luck. This is not a life or death story, but it's a story that I would have included in the book if I'd had it before the book went to press. My book agent asked me to prepare an excerpt from the book. He could send it around, see if anybody would want to publish it before the book came out. So I did. I wrote a 5,000-word excerpt. He sent it to the editor at The Atlantic, who called him or wrote him, I don't know which, and said what 99% of the people must hear when they get a return call from the editor of The Atlantic. He said, Andrew, I really liked the article. It was really interesting, but it wasn't right for the magazine. And normally, that's the end of the conversation. All right, well, we'll pitch it somewhere else. But Andrew, my agent, had sent the manuscript, the whole manuscript, along with the excerpt in his FedEx packet. And one of the senior editors browsed through it and got interested in it and took it home and read the whole thing and really liked it and cobbled together an excerpt of her own, which she then persuaded the editor-in-chief to run as the lead article in the Atlantic's May issue, which will be online tomorrow. For those of you who don't follow the book world, this is the mother of all lucky breaks for an author. If the book fails, it will deserve to have failed. It won't fail because nobody heard about it. People are going to hear about it. People get confused when I stress the role of chance in these events. They hear me, Stuart Varney obviously did hear me, as saying only chance matters. I hope none of you hears me saying that. Charlie Munger, he's the lieutenant, first lieutenant in Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway organization. He said once, if you want to get what you want, the best strategy is to try to deserve what you want. Well, what sort of advice would you give a young person who wants to succeed or become successful in the material realm? Become an expert at something. Get really good at something that other people care about. We don't know the precise number of hours it takes to do that. There's a debate going on. Is it 2,000 hours? Is it 5,000? Is it 10,000? The researchers are hammering one another with angry invective about what the number is, but none of the numbers is small, and that's hours of hard practice. You got to work really hard in order to get the small increments in performance. And so if you want to succeed, you've got to really be hardworking, talented. That's a given, especially in the new markets. Phil Cook and I wrote Winner Take All Society, as Bruce said, 20 years ago. These markets are ones where a tiny number of people can serve essentially the whole world market. And the action is a big shootout to see who the best people are. And so you got tens of thousands of contestants. And some of them aren't very good, but the ones who are really in the race are all good. And the one who's the best, the one who's got the best combination of talent and effort, won't be any luckier than the average contestant. Luck's a random thing. And there will be other contestants in this race who will be almost as good in terms of talent and effort, but who will also happen to have been considerably luckier than the best contestant. And so the best contestant hardly ever wins. We've done exhaustive simulations of this process. You got to be good, you got to be hardworking, but you also have to be lucky in order to prevail. But people don't want to hear about it. E.B. White, one of Cornell's most famous alums, said, luck's not something you can mention in the presence of self-made men. I did it all on my own. That's a natural reaction for people to think they did it all on their own. They've succeeded in a major way. How did they succeed? Well, they were almost certainly very talented. They were almost certainly really hardworking. So you're really talented, you're really hardworking, you've been solving difficult problems every day for 30 years, and then you ask yourself, why did I succeed? You construct a narrative from what's available to you in your memory. And the most available things to you in your memory are all the hard work, all the effort you put in, and all the talent you showed in the competitions you engaged in. So of course that's the reason. It is a reason, but it's not the only reason. You're much less likely to recall the mentor in the 11th grade who helped you over a tough spell, or the time somebody better than you was offered the promotion but had an ill parent and couldn't accept it. All those things, they don't spring quite as readily in memory. I would tell you about all the manifold cognitive errors that people suffer from that lead them to underestimate the importance of luck. I would tell you about Tom Gilovich's very interesting research documenting the different reactions we have to headwinds, things that impede our progress, and tailwinds, things that work in our favor. We're incredibly sensitive to headwinds. When we're facing one, we know it and we resent it and we're very conscious of it. Turn the bicycle route around, you've got a tailwind, great, you notice it at first, but then it just drops out of your consciousness. You're not aware of it. So you're always aware of the obstacles you had to overcome to succeed. It helps with self-control problems if you don't think the world's a random place. How am I going to summon the effort to do the hard things I need to do to have a chance to succeed if I think luck's going to determine the outcome? I'll just sit back like a cork in the river and hope for the best. So maybe the parents who tell their kids, hey, luck doesn't matter, maybe those kids will be more encouraged to work hard. So there are lots of subtle cognitive issues that might make it, perversely in a way, adaptive to understate the role of luck. But even if you think talent and effort are the only things that matter, where do they come from? We don't know, except to say mostly they come from your genetic inheritance and how you were raised, the environment in which you were raised. So suppose you're a person who likes to get out of bed in the morning, eager to get to work, you're smart, you're good at the things that people are willing to pay a lot for. Where did you get those traits? From your parents. They raised you, they gave you your genetic endowment. You want to claim moral credit for those? That's a moronic claim. You're just lucky if you have traits like that. Now, of course, when it comes to expending effort, you have to feel responsible for that. Because if you think, oh, it's just automatic, some people expend effort, others don't, then when the time comes to really summon the will to expend effort, you may come up short. You've got to think you deserve credit for summoning effort, but it's not so clear that in the final analysis you do. The luckiest thing that can happen to anyone, the one thing we can control, is to be born in a place where if you have talent and if you work hard, you have a chance to succeed. And I think back to the days when I was in the Peace Corps, my cook, Birkeman Rye, shown here getting a haircut, was maybe to this day the most resourceful person I've ever known. He could butcher a goat, he could thatch a roof, he could repair my alarm clock, he could resole my shoes, he could bargain tough with the merchants in the bazaar without alienating them. All these things he could do. His lifetime's peak earnings were probably the meager stipend I was able to pay him out of my own meager Peace Corps allotment. And he didn't have a chance to succeed in the way that people like him would succeed here. And here's the policy message of the book. Because people think they made it all on their own, there's a natural tendency for them to think that they're entitled to keep every nickel that came their way. John Locke wrote about this. A man has a natural right to the fruits of his own labor. So I did the work, I got the salary, it's mine to keep. And so there have been insistent demands, not just in the US, but elsewhere, for lower tax rates on people at the top because they earned it. The fact of the budget deficits that have accompanied those tax cuts that we've seen in country after country have had consequences that none of us should feel good about. This slide here tells a very dispiriting story. It says that the children of low-income families who have top quartile scores in math, the really good math students from poor families, are less likely to graduate from college than the kids from upper income families who have bottom quartile scores in math. The dumb rich kids are more likely to graduate from college than the really smart poor kids. I don't feel good about that. Probably few people would admit that they feel good about that. The good news is that while it would be expensive for us to do something about this, those of us who could do something about this could do it without suffering any real hardship. And I'll close with this argument. I was having a conversation with a colleague over lunch, and he asked me, had I heard about all the new taxes President Obama had in store for us? I said, well, I'd heard that he planned to let the Bush tax cuts on the top earners expire, but no, I hadn't heard about others. And he listed 1 through 8, these new taxes that were coming. He seemed surprised that I didn't know about them. I said, you want to know why I don't know about them? Yeah, he wanted to know. Look, is there any chance the government is going to change tax policy in a way that would prevent you or me from getting what we need? He's the author of a successful textbook. I'm the author of a successful textbook. We don't spend as much as we earn. We will leave estates behind. The only question is how big. And so he said, no, that's not what he's, well, what are you worried about? Will they change tax policy in a way that will keep you from getting what you need, what you want, not what you need, but what you want? He said, yeah, that was his worry. So that's another natural cognitive error. The things people like him and me want are not things we need. We already have all that. We want the extras, the special things. Maybe it's a house with a view of the lake up where we live, or a choice slip in the marina, a painting that has become fashionable, who knows what it might be. The things that there aren't enough of. How do you get those things? You have to bid against other people like you, people with similar tastes and income, and hope that you're the high bidder to get what you want. Some people who care a lot about views, they'll end up with the houses that have them. Others will get the things they want. That's the way it works. So what happens then if the government raises your tax a little bit and my tax a little bit? What happens to the outcomes of those bidding wars? And he looked blankly at me. I said, the same houses with views end up in precisely the same hands as before. And so you could pay a little more. The government could be a little more generous in its funding of Pell Grants and other aid for students from poor families. They could graduate without $30,000 worth of debt. And it wouldn't hurt us one bit. He didn't seem fully convinced by it, because I think it's so natural to think that when you have less income, you really will be somehow hurt by that. And when you have less income, most of the time you do suffer because of that. It's because your business did badly that year, because you've suffered a house fire, you got divorced, something happened where you have less income, but everybody else has the same income as before. That makes you less able to bid for a house with a view. But when everybody like you has a little less income, it's completely different. Those things are settled according to relative purchasing power, which is not affected when all at the top pay a little more. So here's the thought experiment I'll leave you with. If taxes on the rich were low, the rich could afford a Ferrari F12 Berlinetta, $333,000. If taxes on the wealthy were higher, they'd have to cut back. They'd have to buy a Porsche 911 Turbo, which costs less than half that. Would they be worse off on that account? Well, as it turns out, the economist's law of diminishing marginal product applies here with a vengeance. The Porsche has virtually every design feature that matters. The Ferrari may not even be a better car, but just suppose it is. If it is better, it's not much better. So the rich don't lose much by buying a less expensive car, but think about the tax revenue. What happens with it? Who's happier? Let's suppose the tax revenue is used, at least some of it, to help maintain the roads to a higher standard. Who's happier? The guy who drives his Ferrari on a road riddled with foot-deep potholes, or the guy who drives his Porsche 911 Turbo on mirror-smooth roads? I'm voting for option 2, if I have any say in the matter, and I think most people, when they think about this question, think it's a no-brainer too. Okay, enough talk from me. I'd be happy to take questions from the audience. If nobody has any, let me just say again how honored I am to have had a chance to give this lecture, and I look forward to a chance to chat with you after the event closes. Any question here?
Could you define luck versus destiny?
I'm not good at distinguishing between luck and destiny. Those are alternative explanations for the same events that people offer. I'm not comfortable myself with the concept of destiny. Again, I have no quarrel with people who, in their religious tradition, embrace the concept of destiny. I hope you will grant me the freedom not to embrace that concept. It's one I've never felt comfortable with. So these are just terms that we have to acknowledge are often used to describe similar things that happen in the world, but people often have very different meanings that they attach to them, and I don't have anything particularly intelligent to say beyond that. I'm sorry.
Thank you. So I found the video you shared with us a little earlier was particularly interesting. While I acknowledge that, agree with you that luck is a meaningful part of all the events that happen in our life, I also see his argument about, hey, we have controls on the effort we put in, we have control on some other aspect of our life, but luck, while it exists, how do we manage it? We can perhaps manage our perception of luck, perhaps we can change our attitude towards it. How do we manage luck?
Yeah. I hope your question didn't imply that you thought I was saying that effort and talent don't matter. I don't believe that.
No, I agree with that.
They matter, but the chance events that come along every now and then also matter, and they matter in ways that are more important than we tend to realize. If it really is a chance event, there's nothing to be done. That chance events happen. Bales of hay fall on you when you're driving along. So what I think is important is the consequences of recognizing that if things turned out really well for you, that in addition to being talented and hardworking, you were also lucky in multiple ways along the way. What we know is that when we prompt people to think in those terms, they suddenly get much more generous about paying forward for the common good. I didn't think I'd have time to show you this, but since it's directly responsive to your question, let me show you the results of an experiment that my research assistant did last year. She gave people a survey, online subjects. They were asked to recall a good thing that happened to them. And one group was asked to think of external reasons that the thing had happened. That group offered things. Some mentioned luck explicitly. Others mentioned people who had helped them or various other things. A second group was asked to think of mention things they had done that had contributed to the good thing happened, traits of theirs or things they had actually done. And then a control group was just told to list a good thing that had happened to you. And at the end, they got a big bonus for participating in the survey and completing it. They were permitted to donate some or all of their bonus to charity, 3 charities they had to pick. And the subjects who had been asked to name external causes for the good thing that had happened to them gave 25% more of their bonus to charity than the ones who had listed things they had done to cause it to happen. And the control group fell squarely in the middle. There is a whole literature on gratitude that essentially replicates this basic finding. If you prompt people to think about the fact that they have something to be grateful for, that makes them happier, it makes them healthier, it makes them more willing to incur costs for the common good. It's a magic elixir almost. I feel like a snake oil salesman if I ever stand in front of a group describing this research. But my hope for the book is that it will prompt people to talk to their successful friends about lucky breaks they may have enjoyed along the way. That may encourage people to be more generous toward the next generation coming along, but even if it doesn't, you'll hear some interesting stories if you ask people about that.
Thank you for your answer. I think I'm getting closer to a key point you're making in terms of recognition of luck, and then gratefulness and the correlation between gratefulness and generosity.
Yeah, that's really a key theme that I strike at the end of the book.
I'm wondering if you could address or maybe have thoughts on the family of man moving through time and sort of attacking back at those pockets which are luck. For example, cancer or whatever, where we're trying to go at it and become stronger against it. And one of the examples that I think of periodically is the possibility of a big meteor coming along and just wiping us all out. And perhaps if we get to the point where we have people outside of this one planet, then we have fought back successfully against that situation. Is no longer a potential for luck to do its number, and perhaps we move into a more lucky state. Yeah,
there are all sorts of things we do to guard against the possibility that misfortune will land on us. Buying insurance is a simple example of that. Elon Musk is trying to make space travel to Mars a practical option so that if we get hit by a meteor, there'll be a colony there that can carry on. Yeah, there are all sorts of ways that you can take purposeful action to minimize the effect of adverse circumstances on you. There are lots of actions we should be taking along those lines that we're not taking. It would be very simple to limit carbon emissions. You just have to charge people for putting carbon in the air. Why don't we do that? Should do that.
Hi, so one thing I found interesting about your talk was that you failed to mention anything about privilege. And so like the last slide that you showed about the kids and their socioeconomic, like where they are, and their test scores, and that's a very obvious example of privilege. So how does privilege fit into luck or anything that you look into with luck?
I'm interested that you say that I didn't say anything about privilege, and then you cite the specific thing I did say about privilege.
Well, I was just saying that you technically did
I didn't
not
say enough
anything
about privilege.
That.
That seemed like a fairer criticism. The fact is, privilege has always been a major force in life outcomes. I was a little uncomfortable about the subtitle of the book, The Myth of Meritocracy, which was suggested strongly to me by the publisher. They didn't like my subtitle, which was A Personal Perspective. I wanted to warn people that there would be some personal anecdotes so they wouldn't say, hey, I thought I was getting a book about luck and it's just your stories. They thought if I called it A Personal Perspective, people would think it was an autobiography, which it really isn't, and nobody wants to buy an autobiography of a non-famous economist. So that, it's a fair worry. So meritocracy, the myth of meritocracy, I didn't like as a subtitle at first because I've been writing for decades that the world is more meritocratic now than it's ever been. Is it perfectly meritocratic? No, of course not. But in the NBA, it doesn't matter who you know very much anyway. It matters whether you can make the shots. In other markets, too, they're getting more like the NBA every year. It's not who you know, it's how good you are. What can you deliver? And if you can't deliver, they don't need you anymore. So meritocracy exists to a much greater degree than before, although if your family has money, that matters in some ways more than ever before. Part of the credentials people take to the job market are these elite degrees that we all know a lot about. I heard a very disturbing statistic at a lecture I attended in the fall. It's that at Harvard and Yale, there are now more students enrolled in those schools whose parents are in the top 1% of the income distribution than there are whose parents are in the bottom half of the income distribution. And if you look at the SAT scores of the children of the top 1%, over time, before income inequality started mounting, they were cruising along at the same gentle slope as the SAT scores of the 75th percentile and not much different from the rest. Then suddenly, 30 years ago, they started to form the hockey stick image, all the tutors, all the extra help they get. So privilege, of course, it matters enormously. And thanks for injecting it into the discussion at the end. It will always matter. It's just that it matters in many ways less than before. And even if it didn't matter at all, we would still have many of these same fundamental problems with the system.
So would it be fair to say that your book is a call for humility for those who have gone into the upper echelon of the socioeconomic food chain, if you will?
The question is, do I view the book as a call to humility? Yes. And the interesting thing from the research is that you would think if people take pleasure in thinking that they made it all on their own, that asking them to think about lucky breaks they might have enjoyed would make them unhappy. Oh, there was that thing that happened. Oh, if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have made it. That would make people unhappy. But the fact is, it has precisely the opposite effect. It makes them happier to think about that. This has been demonstrated experimentally in a variety of other ways, and it makes them more attractive to other people. Somebody who says, I made it all on my own. Would you rather have a drink with that person or with the person who said, yeah, I had a really lucky break, or I might not have ended up in this nice position I ended up in? I'll pick a drink with that second guy. And health-wise, when people are more prepared to acknowledge that they feel grateful for events that happen in their life, they sleep better, they have fewer doctor's visits, they complain of joint pain less. It's just an extraordinary refutation of the economist's notion of scarcity. We say there's no free lunch. If you want more of this, you got to have less of that. But you can, in the realm of human emotion, completely skirt that constraint. The more grateful you feel, the more of all good things come your way, apparently.
Since no one else is here, can I ask a follow-up question? Oh, you are. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I was going to ask if there was time for one more. I guess that answers the question. I guess the book will point to this, but beyond anecdotes, what in the book is kind of proof that luck matters?
Well, the closest thing to proof is really a proof by example. My research assistant who did this study, actually that was a stroke of good luck that she showed up on my doorstep. She was sent me an email, did I need help with any of my projects? Normally I get 10 of those a week and don't have time even to explain why I don't think I need any help. But she mentioned in her cover email that she was a triple major. And she was majoring in economics, math, and one other subject. And the one other subject was comparative literature. And I'd never seen that combination before. So I said, yeah, come by, let's talk, maybe there'll be something. And she explained she'd grown up in China. She had started on a project to do a comparison of detective novels in the original text in Japanese, English, and German. And she had decided in the process of getting far along in that project that, well, what economists do, that's sort of like what detectives do. They have a model of human nature, they gather data, they test hypotheses. Why don't I just become an economist? So she added economics to her list of majors. And I had a physics graduate student doing these simulations for me. He was doing a messy job with it. I said, too bad you didn't come a week earlier. I could have given you this project I've given to this other assistant. You sound like you're qualified to do that. And she asked, well, what's it about? And I explained to her, and the next day she came back with a printout that thick of all the possible permutations of the simulations I had described to her. And this is the closest thing, in answer to your question, to a proof that luck matters. We have a way to sort of test hypothetically the extent to which luck would matter, even if it accounts for only a small proportion of total performance. So the market is it's like a foot race. The fastest runner wins the race. How fast you run is observable, it's objective. It depends on how hard you work and how talented you are in equal measure, and how lucky you are. So in simulations where talent and effort counted for 49% each and luck counted for 2%, there was rarely a contest that was won by the contestant with the most talent and effort. The most talented and effortful contestant will have average luck. That's the nature of luck. Luck is random, it's not correlated with anything else. If you have a large number of contestants, there'll be a large subset of them who have almost the top values of talent and effort, and some of them will be really lucky. And so even if luck counts for a tiny slice of the total, that's all you need. The most talented guy doesn't win. It will be somebody almost as talented who is much luckier than that person. So,
Thanks a lot.
yeah, it's not proof that luck matters, but it made me more willing to think that it was important even when it seemed not to be. Thank you all.